Hey, how's it going? So in this video, I want to talk to you guys about how I took this famous plumber's Facebook advertising campaign from a 1.8x return on advertising spend to a 17x return on advertising spend in cash in the first 7 days of working together, 30x return on advertising spend in terms of revenue, which I do expect them to collect. I want to talk to you guys about what change we made to make that improvement. They've been plateaued there for quite some period of time. And I just want to go through exactly everything that I did to make those changes to help them improve the efficiency of their campaign and start to scale through paid, not just organic. Before I get into that, I just want to mention my name is Sam Sauter. I run a digital marketing agency with my partners. We do 7 figures per year in revenue. We manage hundreds of thousands of dollars per month in paid advertising spend across Meta, LinkedIn, Instagram, PPC, Facebook. We advertise on all the platforms. We've been doing this now for close to a decade. During my career, I've worked with some of the largest personal brands in the world, largest info education businesses, multi-billion-dollar fund managers, SaaS companies that have raised hundreds of millions of dollars in funding. Been doing this for a very long time, done it across 20 different industries. If you're interested in all and learning to grow your business through online advertising, subscribe, and without further ado, I'll just get into the video. So first change that I made when I was thinking about this business and this campaign is, and whenever I'm speaking with a client, is I ask them what is their ICP, okay? And if you ask most clients, they have no clue. For this particular business, this particular offer, it was a plumbing consulting offer. So this was a very successful plumber that had grown his business all the way to the point of exit, and he was doing a consulting offer to other plumbers. This is an offer that I absolutely love. There's a clear, tangible ROI, which sometimes isn't there for a lot of other B2C type of offerings, like in health coaching or the fitness coaching or the dating relationships coaching. So I loved the business, loved the offer, and the guy was very, very good. He knew pricing, advertising, how to sell the company eventually. There was a lot of unique things that he could add financial value that we could charge a fraction of to the business owner, and he had a lot of proof, authority, and credibility behind him to back up those claims. And that's a great leading indicator as to whether or not you're going to be successful from a paid advertising spend if you can actually do those things. But you don't have to have them to be successful from a paid advertising perspective. So when I asked him what his ICP was, he said, well, it's just plumbers. Typically going to be effective or successful from a paid advertising perspective if you're not very, very clear on which type of plumber you're going after. Because in any given market, there's different varying levels of plumbers, and you have to be very, very clear on what pricing is affordable and realistic for each of those plumbers. And then you have to be very, very clear in your messaging and speak directly to the type of plumber that you want to defer to. So for instance, in the real estate industry, 50% of real estate agents aren't doing more than one deal per year. If you're selling an agency service that is $5,000 or $10,000 per month, that might not be feasible for somebody that's doing 1 or 2 deals per year. In the plumbing industry, what we encountered, there are some people that were wannabe plumber entrepreneurs that were plumbers looking to start their own business. That was a particular price point, offer, and avatar, and we could have a particular price point, campaign, and messaging to attract those people. We could also have a particular type of avatar, which is a plumber that is very established in his business, has multiple trucks, and he is gearing towards exit and wants the same outcome as this particular business owner who actually sold his plumbing business for multi-million dollars to a private equity firm. That's a completely different offer, completely different sophistication, completely different price point. Typically when I'm working with a client is I ask them what are all the different packages, all the different price points. We try to create a marketing campaign that is going to promote the package that gives us the highest likelihood of being successful. So with this particular client, they actually, one of their unique differentiators, they were helping more advanced plumbers to exit their plumbing business, okay? And that was a price point they were equipped to pay $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 for that particular sale. And when we studied the online search reports and the data and the trends, we found out that this was actually a very healthy audience size. There were probably 50 to 100,000 plumbing companies in the United States that were in a position to exit in the near future. And then when I looked at the overall marketplace as a whole, I found that this angle of assisting plumbers was actually the most unique. It was the most of a blue ocean versus these other kind of more offers. There were a lot of other competitors in the space that were teaching plumbers how to start their own business, leave their kind of plumbing company to go off on their own, or kind of help these kind of less established plumbing business owners kind of grow their business. Famously, Alex Hormozi, when he was promoting Gym Launch, what he found is that, his ICP was a gym owner that had a signed lease and more than one employee. Those were the candidates that he was specifically looking for. And if you're watching this video, I highly encourage you to take a look at what you want to promote, what package you think is the most core and integral to your business, that is the most amount of gross profit, to be the best entry point into your business, and then ask yourself what specific characteristics need to exist for that person to purchase that product. If you're selling a $5,000, $10,000 offer, it might be very difficult to sell to somebody who's making $40,000, $50,000 per year. You better have a lot of proof, brand, and credibility that they're going to get a immediate return on investment very quickly from that. So from that point, if you then say, okay, we're going to sell this $20,000 offering towards more established plumbing business owners to help them exit, what I'm looking for if I'm running a paid advertising campaign is I want to see qualified sales calls on the calendar for $400 to $500. Okay. And the reason that I had that number in mind is because the business owner could then go 1 for 20 and still break even on the acquisition of the client, which is probably pretty unlikely. So if I'm not getting the ICP, could be plumbing business owners with more than 3 employees, more than $500,000 per year in revenue. If I'm not able to get that person those specific characteristics for less than $400 to $500, then I know that we have a problem. It's a leading indicator that the campaign as a whole is not going to be profitable. Conversely, I could take a different approach and I could position myself differently in the market and say, I want to help existing plumbers break the 9 to 5 and start their own business. That could be maybe a $3,000 to $5,000 price point. The average avatar there is going to be earning between $60,000 and $90,000 per year. And my goal would be, if I'm selling at the $3,000 to $5,000 price point, I need to ensure that I'm getting qualified sales calls on the calendar for $100 to $200. Okay, that would be my target there, because you might find if you're building a whole new acquisition channel from scratch, the sales team might go 1 for 10 or 1 or 15. Do I think that's a healthy and sustainable close rate for a long period of time? No, I do not. Typically, most of the most successful companies and the sales teams that are really thriving are usually closing upwards of about 25% to about 35%. If you have an organic source of traffic, that close rate can be even higher, of 40 to 50%. But you want to start seeing those early indicators of success. You want to be able to quickly identify, shut off campaigns that don't look like they have the potential to be successful because you did the discipline of modeling beforehand. I'm going to show you an example of this really quickly here. So this right here would be an example of a particular model that I would make for a client if we were considering working together. So if they were selling a $5,000 offering, we could very quickly start to see, okay, what are the CPMs? How much does it cost to advertise to that particular avatar? What's a reasonable click-through rate? Do we think that we can get a qualified sales call for a particular price that puts us in a very high likelihood of having the campaign being profitable? So you can see here, this is kind of how we predict the range of outcome. You can see here in this scenario, they're spending $500,000 per month in paid advertising spend. Typically what we find for this particular client that we are modeling, the cost per lead ranges from about $80 to about $40, 20 to 40% result in scheduled calls. We're assuming, about 75% plus show up rate, and then a close rate ranging from 15 to 23%. So these are the types of exercises where you can start to assess the unit economics and see if the acquisition channel as a whole has a chance to be profitable or be healthy. You can see here in these 3 scenarios, we would range from a 2.3x to a 4.2, all the way upwards of an 8.2x return on advertising spend if we were successful. And then you can also insert kind of your fixed cost for the entire business, the gross profit or the amount that you're paying to the sales team. If you're working with a sales agency, you might be paying 20% for a closed deal. If you're working in-house for the sales team manager, appointment setters, it might be less than 12 or 13%. But these are kind of the disciplines and the things that I think through when I'm launching a campaign. And when I was working with this particular plumber, it had multiple different packages, multiple different pricing, multiple different avatars. And the issue with that is that it's hard to, number one, nail a particular message and a creative and hook that's going to speak to that person. If it's speaking to everybody, if it's for everybody, it's for nobody. And then also, I don't have very, very clear expectations on what is a feasible cost per call, cost per lead that I need to achieve for this funnel to be profitable. I don't have early and leading indicators, because if I have multiple different price points, multiple different variations in terms of what makes that person qualified, it's very, very hard to ascertain what that person is capable of spending. Now, you can do all of this and everything that I'm saying, you're still going to have a variation of the different levels of qualification. What you can do is you can just tighten that band, and you can also make campaigns that are more effective and more potent for the people that you want. Typically what I find with a lot of clients is that you want to imagine that after a certain threshold of interest and curiosity, a threshold has to be crossed for that deal to close. And if you're speaking to multiple different people, multiple different types of avatars, called the beginner plumber and the more advanced plumber, it's kind of like they're both just kind of going up a little bit, but it's not enough to make that full high ticket conversion event to happen. But if you really get clear and you start getting hyper focused on who this is for, it sounds ultra potent towards that one person. It can actually push them over that threshold to where a conversion event can happen. But when you're just spreading yourself too thin, it doesn't sound very compelling to either party. Okay. And even the smallest of niches can be a $50 to $100 million per year business. Perfect example of that was Alex Shimozi gym launch. He only targeted micro gym owners with a signed lease and more than one employee. Grew to $50 million per year. So that's another common misconception that a lot of people have, is that they think, oh, I'm going to make less money, if I narrow it down. It's a complete opposite. With referrals, I totally understand if you can accept a wider scope of potential prospects, but paid advertising is way harder than organic and warm traffic. And you need to have an ultra sophisticated, very slick sales presentation for that particular ICP, very sophisticated and very specific sales message and advertisement towards that person to send them to that sales process, very particular pricing, metrics that you're looking at. Everything is just okay with advertising, and the real results come when you start crossing that threshold. And that threshold of sophistication only comes once you've gotten really clear and really focused on who that avatar is. So we did that exercise of financial modeling, and we started to look at that the most compelling way to position this, the most unique way to position this was going after the people that were poised to sell, because that was a $20,000 price point. I checked the CPMs. I didn't think it was too unreasonable that we could target those very sophisticated plumbers. I can talk to you about how we test the CPMs and the variance in CPMs. But we started getting leads very quickly for $20 or $30, and we started actually getting sales calls with these plumbers that were kind of poised for an exit for about $100 to $200, and they closed about 40% of them. On the average, cash collected about $7,000 or $8,000, which led to about a 16x, 14x return on advertising spend in cash, 30x on revenue. We're just getting started. They're already at about 200 to about 300,000 per month, and we're just going to scale it from there. So that was pretty much everything that we did from a financial modeling discipline, from an ICP narrowing perspective. Next thing that we did were just kind of smaller things is we improved their CRM and their tracking. I can show you an example of like another client that we have here. So this kind of gives you an idea on like the granularity, and this is a super small client. You can just see a few $100s a day in paid advertising spend. This is the level of granularity that I think is necessary to achieve profitability on paid advertising in cold traffic. You need to be hyper clear on, is it a constraint in terms of lead quality, the cost per lead, the percentage of leads that are showing up for appointments. That's a big one. The percentage of leads that are scheduling. For this particular business that we're working with here, they had a show up rate of about 40 to 45%. The biggest constraint that I look for is, what's the appointments that are in place? What is the emails and the text messages and the pre-call confirmations that are sent prior to that, to improve that to 50, 60, 70%, which is very healthy. I don't really spend much time on something unless it's a constraint. Could our cost per lead drop in this particular instance from $15 to $12? Yes, but the thing that is really going to constrain your business is the thing that is the worst metric of all of them. So placing all your attention, isolating it to fix that one thing, you'll typically get a higher return than if you try and improve something that you're already pretty good at. And by the way, if you want this particular sheet here on these financial modeling exercises that I take my clients through, or you want the daily tracker sheet to see if you're on track to hit your projections and your KPIs, fill out your information below and I'd be happy to give you a free copy of this. Okay, the next changes that we made were in relation to the ad account structure and the targeting. Okay, so this particular client, they were kind of, in my opinion, misled by a tracking company that wanted to sell them a third-party email list to aid in their tracking. For those of you guys who aren't familiar with online marketing, there's kind of three forms of targeting. You can do broad targeting, which is you allow Facebook or whatever advertising platform to kind of target for you. Use the machine learning algorithm to slowly figure out who is your ideal customer. It definitely makes sense on some advertising platforms, doesn't make sense on others. The second strategy that you have available to you is something called native targeting options. So on LinkedIn, that could be particular job titles. On Facebook, it could be interest targeting. Another type of targeting option that you have available to you on these platforms is called lookalike audience targeting, which is what this business owner was trying to implement, which is you can take a list of your existing buyers, email list, leads, put them into a list. And because these advertising platforms have 30, 40, 50,000 data points per user, they can create an audience of people that look very similar and have a high degree of affinity towards those people that you've uploaded. So particularly this client that was selling to plumbers, Meta is probably the best platform for doing that for them in this particular instance. Could they get Facebook and Google to work? Yes, I do think they could, but you can definitely get to 8 figures with just Facebook, in my opinion. Because Facebook's platform and algorithm is so sophisticated and so intelligent, you can just target broad traffic and it'll start finding your customers for you. I told them I didn't think this list was necessary. It was choking the list. The client was very insistent. They wanted us to do a trial with that particular upload and lookalike list. And then the data showed very, very quickly. We could see, the discrepancy between the cost per lead, same ad, same everything, same funnel, one broad targeting, one towards this custom lookalike list. It wasn't even close. And Facebook, now these online advertising platforms, they're becoming so sophisticated, you don't need to do much. You don't need to target. That's a very convenient truth in online internet marketing. You should be spending most of your time on defining who's your ICP, getting very clear on your messaging, and then having an application on that landing page that asks them clearly the questions that determine if they're your ideal ICP, and then making sure that you're only allowing the pixel to fire if they answer the right questions on that lead. So then the algorithm starts to become smarter at finding you the right type of lead and not just the cheapest lead. And then the last tweak that we made that was just a lot more simpler and a lot easier was we tweaked their copy, their creative, and their messaging. I found that a lot of their current copy that they were running in their paid advertising account, it wouldn't pass necessarily the gas station test. And by the gas station test, I mean, if somebody were to be not super intelligent, in a rush, bored, distracted, see your ad in a split second as they're kind of driving past the gas station, would they understand it and comprehend it, and would it be very clear immediately, or would it kind of be unclear and kind of difficult and confusing? If the answer is the latter, it doesn't matter how sophisticated it is. I have paid so many copy mentors, at this point, hundreds of thousands of dollars for my own education at this point on copy, landing pages. I would pay $10,000, $20,000 for somebody to write copy for me. And the common feedback they would give me is it just needs to be clear, not clever. If you can just take whatever you're writing, put it through a 4th grade reading level, Alex Hormozi talks about this quite a lot, it'll typically convert better. So I was always trying to work with the client on making sure the copy was clearer, simpler. And then the last thing that I was typically thinking about was what is the context and the sophistication of that marketplace. The plumbing space was not as sophisticated as, let's say, the real estate agent space, to where there's so many coaches and consultants selling to real estate agents. There's actually more coaches for real estate agents than there are real estate agents. Don't even get me started on that. But the plumbing space was still somewhat competitive, and there were a few players in that space that they were directly competing with. So just trying to find, being cognizant and explaining in our messaging that, hey, I know there's other solutions out here, and here is how we're different from the other competitors. That's something you have to address if you're very conscious and tapped in and in the know of what your ideal avatar is going through. Just something to keep in mind. Start to write down your ICP, get clear on what they're going through, what are the misconceptions and then come up when they see their ad, and try and address those claims in the ad. For us, my strategy of getting around that for this kind of somewhat sophisticated audience that has been already sold to is positioning us as being this plumbing company that helping the business owner go towards exit, as opposed to just being this general consulting, improve your plumbing business type of business that is more competitive and frankly attracting somebody that was less affluent. What was interesting is typically when you go up market, so you go to the most sophisticated plumbers or the most sophisticated real estate agents or big marketing agencies, your CPMs will raise, because everybody wants to target those really rich people. You'll see it in real time because you're not doing manual targeting anymore on Facebook. You are on some other platforms, but you just see the CPMs rise very radically. So sometimes there's a trade-off there. You have to find the sweet spot. With some of our clients that are selling to real estate agents, we find that if we raise the bar to $400,000 or $500,000 per year in GCI, the CPMs start to get too expensive. Our cost per call raises so far out of KPI. Even if we have a good close rate, we still won't be successful from a paid advertising perspective. So it's about finding that fine balance of friction versus being too qualified and raising up your cost too much versus being too underqualified and just letting anybody with a pulse through your funnel. So those are the kind of things and the challenges that we face every day with clients, is trying to find out what is that ICP, what is the right balance of friction and qualification for your particular funnel. We're very lucky for us is that these plumbers that were kind of pre-exit, that were equipped to make a $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 exit, the CPMs were very low and we weren't punished. And I knew immediately we were getting sales calls for $70, $80, $90 for an offer that was $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. I knew that it was going to be very profitable. I didn't think it was going to be 17x and 30x return on ad spend with revenue. It was showing very early and leading indicators of success. That's pretty much it. That is everything that we did from A to Z, from top to bottom, from changing the model to their ICP, to their ad account, to their creative, to their messaging, to their positioning. There was a pretty serious positive financial ramification to the business. If you haven't seen the testimonial below, I highly encourage you to check it out. But this is stuff that we do every day. We have tons of testimonials below. If you want to check those out, if you're considering working with us, fill out an application below. Even if you're not a fit for our agency, typically our agency clients are doing a bare minimum of $50,000 per month. Most are doing $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 per month. If you're not at that level, then we do have some kind of consulting stuff where I can, talk to you and try and help you out. A little bit less manually intensive for us, but that's still an option for you. Fill out your information below if that's something you're interested in. We can try and help you out and point you in the right direction. If we're not a fit, I can refer you to somebody who is a better fit. So that's pretty much it. Hope to hear from you, and thanks so much for taking the time, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks.